Welcome everybody. Oh, thank you, ma'am. Welcome everybody to our discussion this evening. I'm Dallas. I am going to be the MC for this talk tonight with our lovely panelist and you. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also known as Anarcho Shallot on TikTok, not really active on Instagram. I was about to say my Instagram handle. I'm really excited for this discussion about Black liberation and organizing towards a revolutionary struggle. I want to say thank you to GSUS for inviting me to MC and a little more about my introduction. I am a Black lesbian, anarcho, animist, land steward. I farm in North Carolina, where I'm from. And I love plants, I love cats, and I really believe that the land models liberation for us in all ways. So listening to it and taking care of the land is a great access to getting free, being better people, doing mutual aid, and embodying a politic that liberates not only human life, but all life on this planet. I'm going to introduce this amazing panel. Let me pull up intros, and I will ask if people will just like wave so folks can see you or drop a heart or something as I'm going down the line. So first up, we have Daii is an organizer with the Detroit chapter of General Strike. And please make sure you're on mute if you're not speaking. General Strike US and a mentor of the Black Panther Party. Their work is rooted in revolutionary intercommunalism and the abolition of all systems that reproduce harm. Okay, I'm getting feedback from somebody, so if Mod can just check everybody's on mute. And please make sure you're on mute if you're not talking. That'll make things easier. Educator by nature is a Haitian American Florida native who serves as a history teacher and community project assistant. She is a member of General Strike United States, bringing together a deep commitment to education and grassroots organizing. Carlos Lamar Dixon is the founder of APTAP and a strategist focused on turning conversations about liberation into real power. While many stay at the level of reform, Carlos is known for asking what actually changes material conditions. Grounded in lived experience and sharp analysis, he challenges ideas that sound good but don't produce results. All right, now. Jay Art is an Afro-Chicana artist, abolitionist, technologist, and hoodoo practitioner based in the unceded territory of Ilini Confederacy. Jay supports a trauma recovery embodiment in Black and Brown communities by facilitating survivor-led arts experiences, transformative conversations, and meaningful action. Isaac Jasper, you sent the second one, hold on, is an Afro-Indigenous decolonial journalist, prison abolitionist and art instructor, a revolutionary Pan-African incrumist, and supporter of the liberation of Indigenous people affected by resource imperialism and settler colonialism. Through Black Power Media, he has reported and developed strategies to abolish the prison industrial complex that exploits Black and Indigenous bodies. Jasper served on Leonard Peltier's Legal Defense Committee and currently directs media for the People's Corps while founding and operating TIN Media, that's TIN capitalized with an exclamation mark, an Indigenous-owned news outlet dedicated to truth and liberation. And we have CJ here, I believe, a 19-year-old Black anarchist and Afro-pessimist, currently an undergraduate student and content creator, amongst other things, such as being a community organizer and political educator. Ultimately sees Black anarchism as the best vessel for Blackness to achieve autonomy and liberation. And last but not least, Emon is a Black anarchist organizer and writer out of Southwest Virginia, Monacan Tutela land. He's a co-founder of Black Mindedness, an organization working across grassroots and campus contexts to further Black self-determination in the Roanoke and New River Valley regions of Virginia, among other things. His writing focuses on theorizing Blackness and anti-politics, and his online content focuses on breaking down organizing practices for folks. So thank you all for being here. I'm really honored to be sharing in conversation with you in space. I wanted to invite y'all again, repeating what Daii offered, to drop where you are in the chat. if you're comfortable with that, where you're listening in from and tuning in from. It's good to see that we're coming together across space and time zones and making like you're spending this time on a Friday night. So good for you. Thank you for being here. Tonight, just want to get some housekeeping. Again, please stay on mute if you're not talking. It's lovely to be together, but we want to make this as accessible as possible. Um, the panelists will be asked questions by me, and I will pick people to switch it around. So everybody, we're going to try to share space and get a chance to talk. Please be mindful of how much space you're taking to talk. Time is a construct, and we ain't got all the time tonight. So just be mindful of the length of your responses and sharing the mic with people. And let's be thoughtful and have fun tonight. So I also want to invite people to like get grounded in your body, shake out what might be loose or tense. It is Friday. You've had a whole weekday probably of working. Connect to your breath. Take a moment for in and out, and let's be as present as we possibly can. We've been on screens for quite a while, and I just want to invite you to be here in your body together. We're going to start this discussion off with some thinking critically about the conditions we're living in right now in this country, in this world, before we go into talking about strikes or liberation, because we want to understand with each other together how the system is showing up in our life. So I'm going to ask some questions that will be dropped into the chat with responses. And if y'all will just respond again via chat, what resonates with you based off of the questions. So there will be 3 questions coming. I'll give the answers and we'll flow from there. First question for the chat. Where do you feel economic pressure most? Is that in rent, wages, healthcare, or debt? Second question, where do you feel state power most directly? And you may have an answer that I'm not saying. I'm not trying to feed it to you, but does the state power show up mostly in policing, in the school system, the so-called justice system, child services? And final question for this icebreaker, what feels extractive about your daily life? You're the expert there. So if y'all will drop in the chat, we'll take a look. And panelists, you can participate in this as well via chat. The card payments, that's real. Thank you, Alice. I'm seeing price of food at the grocery store and in the cost of living increase. Renting utilities twice. Food and home goods, economic pressure. Transportation. The state power and surveillance from Musa, I see that. Over policing and cost of living, electricity, CPS working with churches. Economic pressure for me is dependent on location. Rent was intense in Colorado, but I feel the weight of wages and debt in Missouri. On question 3, Jeffrey says, what doesn't feel extractive about daily life? I see a second for surveillance. Thoughtful answers, y'all. Thank you. Paying for health insurance. Lily says taxation, governmental entities is answer to all 3. My time feels the most extracted. Yeah, there's a lot of reoccurring themes here over policing, surveillance, food, the cost of food, cost of living. And we've already named we're coming from different places. And if we're seeing these kinds of similar themes across place and also just as individuals, how we're interpreting the pressure of being alive here, are we thinking about this as solo issues or are they connected? Extractive restriction from reasonable means to pursue passions and health improvement despite still contributing to my community in ways that I know have been told matter. We're seeing it as connected from CJ. Yeah, y'all keep on answering this icebreaker. Keep those answers flowing. We'll get now into, we want to hold that and just take a look at what people are feeling. This is a good conversation to have. Wink, wink. These are good conversations to ask your neighbors if you're not, or the people you want to be in thrival. I'm calling it thrivalship because I'm tired of the concept of just surviving this world with getting to know what people, where people are feeling tight and squeezed and pressured is a really good idea. So take a note. So we'll start now and move towards the panel. Thank you all so much for participating. Thrivalship, yeah, hashtag that, spread the word. Um, no trademark. And again, I'm going to pick somebody to start if I can see anyone. Actually, I'm just going to call a name because I wrote them down. Um, if you do not want to answer, feel free to pass, no pressure, but I know you can do it. So, our first question from your perspective, based off of this icebreaker, are we looking at policy failures or structural design with these pressures, the extraction? What are your thoughts? And I am going to start with Isaac.
I appreciate you starting with me, and thank you to everybody that is tuning in. I hope you are enjoying the conversation thus far. I just want to, before I start, say that you guys are going to hear me bring up Gerald Horn, Harry Haywood, Drew bin Ahad, and I just hope that one, these words, not just these names, resonate with you, but that you take it a step further and you actually hold on. Can you guys hear me now? Sorry. I don't know if you guys were able to hear me before.
It was just quiet, but if you want to repeat those names again, I think they were important.
Yeah,
Please.
yeah.
Yeah.
Harry Haywood, Gerald Horn, and Daruba bin Wahad, and also a little bit of Kwame Nkrumah. And I just, I highly advise that you guys go and not just search these names up, but indulge in the works that they have given us, and some of which have left behind after they've been martyred by this imperialist system. And so, one to kind of answer, the question that is, is this policy failures or is this a structural design? And the short answer is it's structural design, but it would be ignorant of me to just leave the question there. We can look through both Horn and Haywood to show us that what we face is not a series of policy failures. It's not a series of, if we just move one thing from one area to the other. It's an intentional design. It's intentionally designed through a process of settler colonialism built off of extraction. And we can look at Harry Haywood, that traces this, through the betrayal of Reconstruction. He quotes that the revolution had stopped short of a solution to the crucial land question. There was neither confiscation of big plantations nor distribution of land among the Negroes, freedmen, and poor whites. Horn extended this in his book Armed Struggle into the 20th century, noting that California was forged, and I'm a California indigenous, I'm Afro-Indigenous, and I'm California Native as well. So these words resonate with my oppression. Extended this through the 20th century, noting that California was forged through what he classified as triple slavery. That was the enslavement of enslaved Africans, the indigenous populations of Turtle Island, and the Chinese as well, in some small degrees. He emphasized that quote, the police terror that underpinned U.S. apartheid was foundational. And so I want people to really understand that the system is working exactly as it was built. Reforming this is nothing more than a slap in the face to a historical tradition of resisting oppression, resisting imperialism, and we can't keep falling for the trap of seeing some very notable scallywag come around and entrap us into the idea that reform is something that we're looking for. So I'll pass this on to somebody else.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
mean, oh
Go
my
ahead.
bad. I can hop in off of that too. I think with regard, I agree, obviously. It's a structural thing. It's not policy failures. Um the thing that I feel like we have to kind of name clearly pretty consistently. The Scallywag piece sent me. I ain't gonna hold you. That was hilarious. But yeah, the thing I think we shouldn't lose sight of, and the thing we have to name clearly all the time is like when we're living in a structure that's meant to do certain types of harm and do certain type of violence, we can't be surprised when the systems at play end up making that violence happen. We can't be surprised when the policy doesn't necessarily negate that violence, especially in contexts where we're not organized in a type of way to where we can force type of certain policy concessions coming from the broader systems at play. And I'm naming that because I wanted to actually like draw in Modibo Kadali. In his work, he kind of talks about how the government, right, and law is responsive to the movement on the ground. It never actually makes the change itself. So if there is a change around housing policy, maybe something that enables people to have more autonomy over their particular places they're living, the reality that's happened on the ground is that there was already a bunch of organizing happening around it. There was already the changes being implemented. There was already all this movement already happening. So now the policy is just moving to catch up to save the face of the state, to save the face of the government, to make it seem as though it is in control and offering the people something. And then that's projected out to people who do not understand what movement has been happening on the ground. And I'm naming that because one thing I think when we're identifying that it's a structural problem and identifying that policy is working as intended, we also have to identify where the structure's weak parts are and what ways we can organize ourselves in order to kind of force kind of distinctions from distinctions in terms of how policy is functioning. And while we're doing that, keeping at center, it is a structural thing, and if we're not moving and organizing ourselves from below, then we're not, there's nothing that's gonna happen up top. You know what I mean? But yeah, and I'll pass it off on that point.
Absolutely. Definitely, you all know that I strongly agree. A lot of times, you have to understand the nature of the beast, and that's where a lot of people go wrong at, or choose to continue to ignore. When you look at the structural design, a lot of people don't want to swallow that pill and just take in and internalize and understand, the foundation of it is toxic, is sinister, and whatnot, and everything that it will produce afterwards will, continue to reproduce those same harms and whatnot. Iman, you brought up housing, just the attitude around housing as it being everything, housing, healthcare, food, all these things being treated as a commodity, and it's going to continue. I know recently there was just a vote, to label slavery as being a crime against humanity, and of course. The U.S. colonial state project definitely, voted against that, to even acknowledge or take accountability and so on and so forth. So it's not going to be changed through policy tweaks or making the system nicer to us. To think that we can reform or exploitation and things of that nature and make it more ethical is illogical. And I'll pass it off.
Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, y'all can hear me. I would say firstly, it's a structural issue, of course. I heard names like Daruba, in which Daruba basically is when you read his works is one of the people that really took my politics to the next level to really see what type of fight we were in, and also the comrades of Daruba like Huwaisi and Ashanti and those people who are still with us, and understanding that not only, because I see it with William C. Anderson too, not only is this a domestic struggle against the state for blackness, it is a global struggle. You know what I'm saying? Not just against the state, but the civil society's creations known as the state, knowing what is the state, knowing how statist policy and politics criminalize blackness no matter where you are. And where basically the state's construction is to alienate the worker. The state's construction is to make a ruling class, and a class that is able to be exploited. So if you do not even understand that the foundational problem is the state when it comes to things like abolishing capitalism, getting rid of things like imperialism, but also understanding that these systems themselves are foundationally anti-black as well. So you understand what black suffering looks like, how long black suffering is going on, what are the projections that are made onto blackness, how does black anti-blackness function differently than things like racism, how does anti-blackness function differently from other systems and struggles that we see, because we understand that black suffering is something that is unique. It is not something that is really applicable to anyone else's history or struggle. So it's just when you also look at the history of armed struggle against colonialism, you look at the history of maroon societies, you look at places in where blackness has been able to occupy a system of autonomy and egalitarianism that really is off of the plantation in a way. And I would say you see a constant battle between blackness and the entity known as the American state. And I was gonna say Scallywag did fry me, but I think we should name him. Like the statist politicians in America, such as Zohran Mamdani, the political recuperators in our culture like Jay-Z, all of these people who seek to just repurpose already existing harmful systems around blackness and just slap a black face on it, known as identity reductionism. This is how you can get a Barack Obama, a Kamala Harris, the purposeful reproduction of the black politician to not only recuperate radical energy, but just radical struggle. And seeing as if it was some way we can just work within the structure, maybe that may alleviate. Maybe if we just become more black overseers, if we just have the access to power within a hierarchy, that somehow is going to be libertarian, which we understand that's just not how it works. So it's not until we see that the state must be abolished and all agents and entities of anti-blackness must be taken up with, that we're not going to see anything. Because you can even see how this like just a minute understanding of the people of the problem that we find ourselves in, and which George Jackson also talks about this, that at his time he came to the analysis that it was property relations, which is the foundational problem. And what the question that I pose to people all the time is, who were the first people deemed as quote unquote property, or are we even seen as people in the first place?
Man, what can I actually say after that young man just got off like that? But as far as policy failure versus structural design, I don't think it's policy failure at all. Because you see, if that was true, you'd see some places getting it right, you know. But everywhere you go, we got the same story. Rent is high, nobody's making any money in their jobs, and people are absolutely stressed out, you know. We got student debt up the woo-wah, you know, all this thing where they put credit and they hold it over our heads. Man, we're all in a trap. So it's not a mistake, it's just consistency. And consistency means design, you know. Housing isn't broken, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Those landlords were built to bust you upside your head, you know what I'm saying? Labor isn't undervalued, it's being priced to maximize profit, you know. So when we call it policy failure, we're already killing the system and we're letting that shit off the hook. But this is the system doing exactly what it was built to do. The founding fathers of this nation, they owned human bodies. When they penned this contract, they had the interest of corporations in mind. A thing I always look at is the United States of America is an incorporated entity. Wisconsin, the state I live in, is an incorporated entity, meaning, we all follow that, business world stuff, meaning they had to register this thing. And that's what, government is going to hold the interest of. The government is always going to put corporations above human interests. And so it is not policy failure. It is a structural design.
Well, how do I do it?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna, unless other panelists want to speak, I just want to highlight this idea of structure versus policy always makes me think about the plantation, and Isaac, to what you were saying, the triple slavery, and Emon, following that point with the change we see in the system in the United States always comes from people in the street collectivizing. They tell us that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Enslaved people freed themselves by continuing to fuck the shit up, like make it really not lucrative to own human beings and make it very challenging to get people back to the plantation. That disruption of the economics of enslavement was really a blow to the system. And the fact that people don't want to acknowledge that sets us up for such confusion around what we're at today when we don't have a blatant cotton plantation in our faces. We have police budgets going way up while school funding or mental health for youth especially, but people in a city or municipality is not funded at all. And these aren't issues that are mistakes or design flaws. They're a clear illustration of priorities. To what you were just saying, the government will always prioritize oligarchy, the capitalist interest, and that has proven time and again to be the case. So thank you everybody for participating. We're now gonna ask this question of ourselves. If exploitation is foundational, and this is for people to think on, can reform eliminate it or only manage it? You can put that in the chat, chew on that one, nibble a bit. And we're going to be sharing a graphic, reform versus liberation, naming the contradiction. So under this reform column, we have better wages, more representation. Someone named CJ was talking about Kamala Harris, Barack Obama. I know people who were absolutely over the moon when Obama was elected. I was in high school, and who did he bomb the most? It's actually like a really disturbing, I don't even want to call it ironic, it's just super disturbing. Policy changes, inclusion into capitalism. On the liberation column, we have self-determination, economic control, collective ownership, freedom from extraction. So my questions, this is for the chat again, we're having a conversation. Which column, when you look at these, feels like what we're currently being offered? And which column feels like what we actually need? I've lied a few times, but not about that. So go ahead and drop in the chat what y'all think. What are you seeing? More like reform at best. We need total liberation column. An illusion of reform, but not even. I appreciate that. Inclusion into capitalism. One-ish. Yeah, I think today in this administration, we don't have a lot of what's going on in the reform column. Um, Coerced into column one, but column two is what needed. Lip service to reform, nothing even close to what we actually need. I like this. Y'all sound pretty fed up. Did someone speak?
Yes, sorry. We had a question from someone. Could you expound a little bit more on when you say extraction from those first slides? What do we mean by what is the state extracting from us?
Well, that was up for people to talk about where they feel extracted. Extraction, by definition, means something that's being taken without being replaced or replenished. Like you can extract a mineral from a mine. Most miners don't plan on putting something back. If you extract nutrients from a soil, from the soil, that's taking it out. So in terms of the system's offerings, putting big air quotes around that, what do you feel is being taken from you, if anything, in your experience? I think people are answering again. Energy, surplus value. Labor being extracted. For example, you spend most of your life working. What do you get for that? This was a critical thought question. Especially without consent, any replacement or compensation is still unaccountable, I think. Is that health? And Jeffrey has a response as well. Good, good, good. Yeah, thanks for jumping in, everyone. So that was a great first round of questions, getting clear on where our panel stands on this. And obviously, you all are invited to listen, keep thinking critically. We are asking these questions along the way. Do you see yourself or American people or wherever you are in the world living in a system of reform or liberation, or like people have been saying, the illusion of lip service of reform, not in liberation? Trying to place where you're at and get serious about the reality that you're dealing with so you know how to move forward. This is part of strategy building, getting that clarity. So next question I want to ask for the panel, I'm going to start with somebody new this time. If extraction is foundational, can reform eliminate it, or does liberation require something beyond the colonial state? And I want to start off with J. Art, please.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on this panel, and also thank you so much to everyone who is present tonight. I think that extraction is something that can't be reformed. Like you had mentioned, Dallas, I appreciated you giving a more in-depth definition of it. It's something that takes and doesn't replenish. And I think that right now, especially, we are people have expressed their grievances in the chat. People are hurting. People are feeling, depleted in energy, depleted in resources and funds. And I think that the replenishing of that is not going to come from the state. It's not going to come from these systems that have repeatedly shown us time and time again that we're here to be harmed. This was founded on genocide. This was founded on the enslavement of African people. And so I think that ultimately what has to happen is we all have to commit to building outside of this. When I was so in 2016, I provided some mutual aid to the water protectors in Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. And that was kind of the first time that I really saw how powerful it is to build networks of mutual aid. And that kind of that foundation continued for me into 2020, and into present day. I think that that largely informed kind of where my practice lies, and just building with people what the state has never given us. And especially in relation to just our health, physical, mental, spiritual. Um, I know that a lot of us need more aid than we're getting, and it really does depend on us to provide that to each other.
But what I was gonna say was, what we need to still understand is the plantation never ended. The plantation is not gone. It's just known as the prison industrial complex now, and where you do have people actually on old chattel slave plantations, such as Angola State Prison. We need to understand that one of the main reasons why we find ourselves in the situation that we do is right after the Civil War. If we study the history of armed struggle against enslavement, you're going to come across people and figures such as Moses Dickinson, who made a group known as the Knights of Liberty, in which the Knights of Liberty, they wanted to commit an armed insurrection against enslavement and either seize land, or they were just going to abolish enslavement and just figure out what they were going to do after that. What we understand about the Knights of Liberty is right before they were about to stage this armed insurrection, Moses Dickinson calls it off. And what we see come out of this is the story of John Brown, because John Brown didn't listen, in which this is where John Brown does the raid on Harper's Ferry. What we understand about what Moses Dickinson ended up doing, he ended up staying in St. Louis, and he ends up organizing other things like founding the first HBCU in Missouri, I believe, Lincoln. But what also happens to a lot of the Knights of Liberty is they go and join the Union Army when the Civil War is fought. What I believe that we got out of the Civil War was a stage of reform in which enslavement on direct plantations for everybody was no longer the norm. Now all we have to do is mark you with criminalization, and then we can take you right back onto this plantation, in which that's what happened to a lot of people through things such as peonage, debt slavery, and where you see at this point in history in the prison industrial complex, early stage before it gets overcome with capitalist overconsumption. This is why you still see Black people disproportionately making up the prison industrial complex, but you also see the incorporation of whites and non-Blacks. But at this time, some state prisons had as many as 90+% Black inmates, and we just see that this system, this structural foundational issue known as anti-Blackness, is not reformable. You can't just slap a law on top of the already existing anti-Black state and world order and just expect to get a new restriction out of this. So what I believe was the Knights of Liberty's biggest mistake was going to fight for and in cohesion with the state known as the Union Army, in which the best interest of Blackness is never going to be met by the state, because the state seeks to enslave Blackness. And I'll just leave it there.
Absolutely. That's an important part. My comrade has definitely hit it on the nail with that. You cannot reform anti-Blackness. You cannot reform colonial occupation or capitalist dependency and whatnot. Um, yeah, and it just comes down to us also realizing our participation within the system. Um, it also perpetuates the extraction that's taking place across borders and overseas, to the diaspora. When we look at Congo, Haiti, and Sudan, and things of that nature, not only extracting from us here, but extracting, from our kin, from our relatives, our people beyond as well. So can the question is, can the same system that feeds on us or profits from our oppression become a vehicle for our freedom? And the answer is always no. We have to uproot it. Yeah, I'll pass it off.
Yeah. Oh, snap. Yeah, I wanted to jump in on that bit because kind of understand extraction as foundational. I think kind of we can even dive into that a little bit further to explain why, why liberation requires something beyond the colonial state as has been elaborated so far. And a large part of it is understanding that when you have a dynamic of extraction, right, you have a situation where the person or the group or the thing that's extracting from you is basically you're functioning as kind of an implement or kind of a agent for that thing's imagination to come into reality, right? So when we talk about power, if we talk about things like hierarchy, right? When there's a mountain, right?
Yeah.
If you have a oh snap, hold on. Somebody might be off mute. Um, Either way, when we talk about power, if you have a dynamic where one person holds power over another, it's not always a situation where this person is just beating them on the head with the mallet and saying, I have power over you, blah, 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 blah. The reason power becomes structural and the reason power becomes something that's institutionalized is because a dynamic is set up to where you are forced and coerced through deprivation, through the threat of violence, through all of these different things to do what that person or group that holds power over you wants you to do. So when we're talking about colonial and carceral systems and things like these, we're looking at a situation where the violence was done initially, and then it was institutionalized in a way that made it to where we end up acting it out against each other. We end up acting it out and reproducing it through our workplaces. We end up acting it out and reproducing it through our relationships, through even the ways we organize and try to make change, right? So I'm naming all of these things to identify the fact that when we're talking about liberation, right? And we're talking about the way we have to go about structuring ourselves, we have to understand that even the way we think about it has to move outside of the confines of what's been established. We have to, like as Jay was saying, we have to move towards not even just the outside of the state's grasp, but the outside of how what the state deems as legitimate, as legible to it, right? We can't sit over here and think as though, oh yeah, we're gonna keep building on this same dynamic, right? And reaffirming the same power dynamics, the same dynamics of control, and think that that's going to produce a thing like a liberation. We have to kind of move beyond the extractive logics internally, right? Not just with ourselves, but in our formations. And that's how we kind of move a little bit closer to that thing called liberation we're trying to get to. You feel me? But yeah, I'm gonna pass it.
All right.
I, I, is somebody going? All I think about is what my granny used to tell me. People only allow you to do people only do what you allow them to do. And that's the same thing with extraction, okay? So you can raise the wages, but you still got to rely on the boss to cut the check. You can put a rent cap on it, but someone still owns the roof over your head, and you can expand healthcare, Obamacare, whatever kind of care you want to name it. But at the end of the day, that's a corporate giveaway. Uh, People use their health insurance two, three times a year, but they're still paying for it monthly, so that's extraction. So without, a transfer of ownership of power, we can't, even expect to eliminate extraction. And I think somebody said previously about how it's internal. We have to. My brother Emon said we have to get rid of the internal, extraction. And the only way we can do that is by opening our eyes and seeing where this real power, this hierarchy that you talk about, comes from. And that's all I got to say about it. So, but our outcomes won't change unless we actually go and take what's ours. This reform is us begging for things. Reform is us asking the slave master to treat us better. We'd have to take what's ours.
I'm just gonna add a little something different because someone did ask in the chat, what do we do about it? Right? And I'm not gonna repeat what everyone has said because everyone's right. There's reform is begging. Reform is just assuming that, hey, if I do a little, I'm gonna use Booker T. Washington and W.E. Du Bois. They both had opposing views on how Black people should go about equality. And Booker T felt that one day they'll give it to us. If we act right, we do it right, they'll give it to us. They're gonna want the reform because we're just being the good Black Negroes, right? And we all know that's not true. That's not happening. It still has not happening. And but if we do the revolutionary strike right, if we give the capacity to the point that we're saying we don't want your little reform. Y'all could have gave it to us 5 years ago. You could have gave it 10 years ago. The me I am now was not the me before. I would accept reform. I was a blue no matter who person. I would have accepted reform a couple of years ago. But the me now, no. It does. I have came to the clear vision that thinking, oh, we do a little here, a little there, and we'll finally get to what we want. That that's not what's going to happen. And if we make sure that we're doing the collective in our identity and we keep open to understanding that the reform's not going to work, then we can just finally throw it away. But that's how we go about it, is going about and ensuring building that capacity so that we can no longer keep thinking reform is going to solve all the issues.
I was gonna ask if I could kind of add on to that as well, because that's exactly what I was looking at too. I was sitting there like, hold on. I just peeped that. And I hate double dipping on questions, but it's one of those things. I feel like sometimes when we ask, okay, what do we need to do? A lot of times there's this idea that it takes this giant leap to start operating outside the logics of the system that we're sitting within. The reality of it is that the way we build outside of what already is by rejecting it in the most small decisions we make about how we're building. You know what I mean? So we can even think, and I'll give an example, like a personal example. One decision that we made internally as an organization, I'm gonna just talk about when it was just on campus. On campus, a decision we had made was that we're never gonna register our organization. Why were we not gonna register our organization? Because the reason people register their student organizations is to get funding from the school. And what comes along with that funding is having to abide by the school's regulations. You see what I mean? And when you have to abide by those regulations, you are subject to certain things that you just wouldn't be as regular students. You see what I mean? Now, when we made this decision, what were we having? We were having administrators after so and so telling us, yo, y'all need to register y'all's organization so you can get access to all this money and you can be a part of this thing and you can get this type of platform. But we were like, that's going to hurt our project. What did we do instead? We said, okay, we're going to go to every single Black student on this campus that we see, and we're going to walk around with these flyers. And every single day, we're going to give five new Black students, a flyer talking about what we're doing. That is the most basic practice. I'm telling you, within months, the entire Black community knew what we were about, and we had started just a little bit ago. You know what I mean? There's certain things that rejecting the pathways offered to you by the state allow, like, open your mind up to by necessity. So whenever you reject the state, you open yourself up to deeper relation. You open yourself up to working with people without that mediation, and you open yourself up to building without dependency. And that makes your dynamic with the state a different type of thing where you can start extracting from it without it consenting to that. You see what I mean? So we have to start thinking on the minuscule level. How do I do that at the lowest possible level right now? And then let's keep walking. We learn as we walk, we build it up as we go. You know what I mean? But it takes the first step. You get what I mean? That's the biggest thing. I just want to add that. My bad.
Yeah, I'm glad that you Iman, that you mentioned, and a lot of people, like you guys really laid it out. And I'm gonna answer this question, but I want people to historically understand that, like, extraction is foundationally a part of the imperial process. There's never been a time period where we could look at extraction and be like, oh yeah, that shit was positive. No, there's never been a time period where the exploitation of other people has been positive, ever. For society, for even a said certain group of individuals, there's always consequences for what you do. And in this case, you cannot reverse the exploitation of the Congolese people in the tune of 15 million people. You cannot look at that as extraction and be like, that shit's not foundational. And I'm going to try not to cuss. I apologize, you guys, but a lot of these conversations, you know, like Tupac said, you run out of words to say in regards to the oppression that you have been in, that has been inflicted upon you. So if I use the F word, the S word, and whatnot, I apologize. But I'm expressing in a manner for which that I don't have a definition that properly confines what I'm feeling and how other people are feeling as well. When I look at the three, when Gerald Horne talked about the three slaveries, when he talked about the three populations of people that were affected by the imperial agenda, that my people are one of them. I have to look at that as a foundational aspect to how we got here, how California got to where it's at, how people like, and you know, I'm gonna just name drop, but how people like Butch Ware can go and run for governor, you know, and the governor's historical presidents was the extermination of my people. They used the first bond, meaning bonds that we use for churches to be built, for schools to be built, for roads to be reinstituted and whatnot. They use this, you know, as use that he used that as an aspect of extermination against my people in the tune of millions of dollars. That's foundational. So the extraction has always historically been there for us to highlight. We have anti-intellectualism. We have a system that feeds off of that, meaning that they don't want us to come to these conclusions. They don't want me, and they don't want this panel to be around. That's a part of the COINTEL process. They don't want this to be for us to be on the same level, understanding the extraction and resource extraction via resource imperialism that they've implemented onto our people. So it goes into liberation. You know, we asked the question: liberation requires something beyond the colonial state. We have no other option. Liberation in its defining moment, in its definition as a whole, means something completely outside of the mode. We could use Kwame Nkrumah to justify this. What we live under is a mode of kleptocracy ran by neo-colonial agendas that fuel resource imperialism. So we have people right now that'll tell you, go out there and vote, not knowing that we have Kwame Ture that said, yes, I shed for the blood, my ancestors' blood shed for that vote, but the vote does not revolutionize me. The vote does not liberate me. That is only a means to mass mobilize and mass global and on a globalized level our people, to mass organize them. We have lost sight of the goal. So what we have is we have individuals that come in and they feed us this, you know, reformist agenda, and they tell us that our liberation comes through voting for some pork chop eating Cadillac driving, as someone would say it, said it 20 years ago. I'm saying it now. You know, you know, they'll come in and they'll say, you know, hey, we'll come in and we'll give you your freedom. You know, we'll come in and we'll be you know another Adam Clayton Powell. You know, we'll come in and we'll be a Barack Obama. You know, we'll be a individual out there, even on the right. These are aspects and elements of neocolonialism, and we must eliminate them. And the only way we do that is through finding a way forward that sits outside of the imperial mode, and that's already been created. Like I said, anti-intellectualism runs prevalent. So motherfuckers will tell you that Tariq Nasheed is the most intellectual individual, you know, within the African diaspora. But we have people like Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Morris Bishop. The list goes on. Thomas Sankara, contemporary people like Gerald Horne. I got a book behind me written by Orasami Burton, one of my homeboys. This is the process that we need to follow. The Black radical tradition of understanding that our liberation does not come from the imperial mode. It never did. This goes on to the reparations tip. I don't know, we're probably not talking about this, but I get sick and tired of people saying the reparations is attached to a capitalist mode. I'm sorry, but that's equivalent to my ancestors getting whipped 30,000 times and saying, give me $30,000 and not properly contradicting the fact that I'm getting fucking whipped. That's where we're at. We're consistently falling for concessions, as Imam Jamil Al-Amin would put it. These are concessions. We understand it through politics and education and politics within education. There is no consolidating our liberation for the betterment of imperialism. That is not radical. That is anti-revolutionary, counter-revolutionary, and you look like people who are. I'm gonna pass this on to someone else.
Thank you, thank you. I hear the passion. Day, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it quick, but the energy, the spirit, I say to everything, definitely spitting fire, everyone. I just wanted to bring up the fact the biggest struggle that we are up against is breaking those mental chains within our community and without without our community. Every community should be having these discussions just to emphasize that. But reform and a lot of reason why people are reluctant to discussing liberation and things of that because they are comfortable, they are familiar with reform as well. People cannot picture a life after capitalism. They cannot picture what liberation is. America, Triple K's has already defined that. And calling this the land of the free. People come into the world, with that perception that they are free. When we've inherited the struggle, but already seen it in the chats and we've been talking about it. The solution is building outside the system for us here in this room on this video for us to be out boots on the ground, and even if we can't be boots on the ground, spreading what people are doing boots on the ground and spreading the awareness, but showing the people those alternative systems, feeding the people, those establishing the survival programs, the mutual aid networks, and things of that nature, so they can actually see and envision it themselves and actually feel empowered. People are afraid to take that responsibility as well, to get out there and what the responsibility to own the means of production, to own the resources and their land and things of that nature. So we have to practice with them and struggle with them as well. And that's why we are, creating more spaces as such to discuss these ideas and practices as well, but being out and actually doing it with them. All right, and I'll pass it.
Thank you all. Thank you all for such thoughtful questions, the passion. You're speaking with a lot of clarity and vigor. I also saw a question in the chat. How do we do collective ownership without getting to a point of greed? And I think it is time to name the role of patriarchy as a foundational aspect. Patriarchs invented capitalism and every economic system of extraction that we know, the racial dynamic of the United States, colonization, the internal and external imperial projects that people of the global majority are suffering under. And this idea that greed is like an inherent human status is a project and a trick of patriarchy. So I first want to offer the abolition of the internal, like Day just said, the mental chains. That internal patriarch needs to be killed. The internal cop, the deputy, needs to be killed. It's like Ruth Wilson Gilmore writes about, and Angela Davis write about. We have to check these things in our head, like, oh, well, people are going to be greedy. Collective ownership is the antidote to greed. Who's going to take it all if we all belong to it, if we all own it, if we're all stewarding the earth? So just paying attention to that in your mindset. And for the person asked, what do we do now? Good thing you're at a general strike event. Sign up, get involved, general strike. We're heading towards that. So I do want to move us forward. And Educator, you mentioned Du Bois. Du Bois described enslaved people leaving plantations, refusing labor, and destabilizing the Confederate economy, calling it a, quote, general strike. This wasn't symbolic, it was an economic disruption. This is what I was bringing up before about the way we're taught about, oh, slavery ended because Abraham Lincoln. That's a reformist ideology, and it helps build this idea that you can trust the government, you can trust a good president. When I was a kid, people would love to say Abraham Lincoln was our first Black president. As a child, I thought that was deranged. Really learning what he thought about Black people and what he especially did to disenfranchise Black people and Indigenous people. That was super insulting. And I mean, deranged doesn't describe this place is hell for real. Like just the levels and levels of lies and backwardsness were taught. So after emancipation, we're seeing Black legislators reshape Southern governance, public education expands, labor protections start showing up. And this rise in Black power gives rise to backlash. CJ was talking about some of this, the increase of white supremacist terror, of course, through lynchings, Jim Crow coming along, which is a sort of I don't want to call it an evolution, a mutation of the Black codes, vagrancy laws, and things like that. Capital protecting itself. Again, the aristocratic class, these plantation owners have, quote, lost their workforce. Again, going back to Abraham Lincoln's our first Black president. After the Civil War, who did get reparations? It was the landowners, the plantation owners who lost their property when formerly enslaved people were AKA freed. And then dividing poor white people and Black workers, which was originally a project from Bacon's Rebellion. This was a colonial, again, patriarchal, aristocratic project in Shays' Rebellion in Virginia that really set off the division of people in colonial America by race. The indigenous people separating Black African people and white people, because when they joined up and started burning shit down, that was a no-go for the ruling class. But this gets emphasized again after so-called emancipation. And then, of course, another form of this backlash to Black power rising is state violence. And this is especially a time, it's not the only time, but especially a time when across the country, you see the massacres of Black towns, incorporated Black towns happening again and again and again. Tulsa, Greenwood, Idy, North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina. And this is not just a Southern issue. I have to emphasize this as someone from the South. It's infuriating that people only think, well, lynching happened in the South. The KKK was only in the South. For a long time when I was a kid, the KKK headquarters was pretty well known in New Jersey. So that and the Fraternal Order of Police, this also ties into the state violence and what we're seeing the slave patrols turn into cops, which are the cops we know and love today, right? This is a backlash that hasn't stopped, and the reverberations into the modern day are very much things we are still being punished for. So, from our panel, and I'm going to start with Educator first. What made Black labor powerful in this moment that I'm talking about post emancipation during the Reconstruction era, and what made it vulnerable?
So, thank you, because I'm glad I wanted to go first. Well, what made it powerful in that moment is it wasn't just a scattered withdrawal of power. It was specifically something that made the South really powerful, which is agriculture. It wasn't just cotton, it wasn't just tobacco, it was all of it together. And through because the South was funded by this agriculture, the Confederacy, that's one of the start of the domino besides the total war. Then with the total war of the Union coming down, destroying everything, anytime I teach this lesson, the Civil War, I always say, look around the South and look around the North. You can definitely see how much they destroyed it. Definitely well deserved. We're gonna ignore the fact that the North needed some destroying too, because they also was not good when it comes to racism and treating the freed people that did move up there. But with the timing of the total war, the timing of as the northern troops came down, the enslaved would leave every time, as they came down. So there was no way for the Confederacy to try to stop one and focus on the other. And then on top of that, they didn't wait. There was no, oh, we're gonna wait until so and so tell us to leave. The troops came, they ran. That is the decentralization of it all. There was no waiting for one person to tell them to leave the plantation. They came, they left. There was no thought about it. Uh there was an organization of, hey, you heard about what's going on? What should we do? And that was just a plan. But there was no leader in that. Now, what made them vulnerable? Uh, well, the politicians were still largely white landowning males, even if the ones in the North, even when the African Americans started to take seats, it doesn't matter. The majority of the politicians were still white landowning males. Besides that, we have the failed Reconstruction. Um, though the President Grant at the time was like, hey, we have to just kill all the Southerners because they went against the country. He had too many people that was like, no, we're not going to do that. If he had his way, who knows where we'll be. But I'm going to leave that there because I do want to go on forever because I love talking about this. So,
What I'll say about it is extraction from blackness known as labor has been the foundation for, you know what I'm saying, this country since its inception, since we've been here, since we got here. Um, I'll say that during I'll say even during the Civil War, but even post Civil War, you see a splinter in the white working class and black, you know what I'm saying, proletarians in incidents known as race riots, really. Some of these things being like the draft day riots, and where the white working class is finding out that black laborers may be coming from down south and they may take their jobs. You know what I'm saying? So we have to understand that the white ruling class uses systems such mechanisms such as patriarchy, not only to create divisions within between races, but also inside of movement building. These things are antagonistic. You know what I'm saying? These things exist. You know what I'm saying? Patriarchy existed within black organizations such as the BPP. Patriarchy was very commonplace during civil rights organizing, even before then. So it's I think from these early movements of black people going on, you know what I'm saying, or trying to do or mount a general strike to, you know what I'm saying, pull their autonomy back in and pull their self-determination together. We also see that through this struggle, there were other struggles that came out of this as well.
I would just say that it was black labor's most powerful thing they had was positioning and where they sat in the system. They weren't just working, but they were working in places that if they took themselves out of it, the system just couldn't function. When we speak of like plantations, there, you just had to be a slave. If you didn't have any labor for the plantation, you didn't have an economy at all. So when we got to this industrial age where the factories came, black labor was able to make things stop because we sat in the position of the producers. Really, all they had was black people to run all their new machines that they just got. So black folks were able to have the power there. But what made them vulnerable and what I think makes movements to this day vulnerable is the fact that we don't have much protection. And that's just the honest to God truth. We don't have any strike funds. They didn't have any strike funds. So it was no systems to feed people if they stopped working, and no protections for backlash. Like we say, these politicians, they come and they promise us protection and they promise us the world. But look, it's been hundreds of years of empty promises. And on top of that, I think somebody mentioned previously that we were divided. So even when we had power, we couldn't hold it long enough to actually, change things permanently. So that's something we should look at moving forward. That's why I told Daii when we were organizing this this panel, I said, hey, these are questions that could potentially uncover strategies for us, because we have consumer pacification. You got a young man who's working at Amazon making $50,000 a year, and he's 19, 20 years old. They're extracting for sure. He probably has no time off. But so when you say, "Oh, we're gonna make sure you're fed and housed," like that young man doesn't care about that. He cares about that scat pack he just bought off that Amazon salary, So we need to take the vulnerabilities and look at them and analyze them and see how can we move more effectively in this modern age of digital capitalism. So that's my spiel.
Absolutely, Carlos. And just to expand on what you said regarding strategy, that's why it's so crucial for us to utilize a historical context and to look back on is to build up, our way forward. Don't get it twisted. We stand on the shoulders of giants. As you all just said, our people was definitely resisting and didn't, receive freedom, passively. They were fighting and struggling for, and that struggle again we've inherited. But just looking back to see, what happened, what could have, what we can learn from. Again, we see Reconstruction, failing because when we were emancipated, reparations were given to the oppressors, and we didn't have that material power, the political or the military power to continue to defend our Reconstruction. And the energy was sucked back into the system. What more oppressive laws, the slavery evolved, sharecropping, black codes, and Jim Crow and things of that nature. But now, just thinking of our strategy, like you all just said, when we think about, what our tactics must be, what our strategy, our actions must produce, our resistance has to be material. We must be building up, the cadre. We must be building up and ensuring that those of us doing the work are taken care of and creating more full-time professional revolutionaries, so we can form that political formation, and also our defense. We must defend what we develop, what we create collectively. So the blueprint is definitely there, and this is why it's important to again know our history, the knowledge of self, knowledge of culture, our relationship to each other, the global community, and things of that nature. Um, the statement, if you don't know where you came from, you will never know where you're going. So yeah, and I'll pass it off.
Yeah, I was about to say, and I think this might be a little shaky in terms of how it relates to labor, on my point, on my piece. But one thing about labor and kind of the strength and the threat of it, that was identified by colonial powers at the time, especially around Great Dismal Swamp area, right? I was reading about this for a while, like a few months ago. So you feel me? It's right here right now. It's right here right now. So the one thing about the Great Dismal Swamp Maroons, right? These people were in a situation where they were blended with the ecology so well that colonial actors like these state actors and different white slavers, they were scared to go into to go into the swamp. And this was the case like all the way up to the Civil War, right? They were left alone to the point of being able to basically in like I don't want to say infiltrate, more so infuse themselves into the Civil War in certain instances and literally liberate whole towns. Like this was the type of struggle that they were engaged in. And this is something they did largely out of necessity and out of a means of survival, even more so than they did so out of a sense of innate solidarity, right? They were getting incurred upon and then they responded aptly, right? So I'm pointing to this because there was this amazing force, like force struggle that was rested in a place that the colonial institutions viewed as sovereign. These colonial institutions did not want to mess with these people, and these colonial institutions couldn't mess with these people for real in their own territory, right? But at the same time, what were the white slavers doing? What were the colonial institutions doing on the plantations? They were stirring up thinking among the black enslaved people, right? And they were saying to them, "Oh, don't go out there. They're dangerous to you." You see what I mean? Don't go out, don't go run off because they'll do something bad to you. You're part of us. You're integrated into our society properly. You're in your right position. So when we get to the point where the emancipation happens, right, on paper, when we get to the point where the emancipation happens, while yes, the emancipation happened, we're still in a situation where the black labor power that's vested and concentrated on these plantations are still operating through the logics of thinking, okay, I just got to figure out a way to integrate my way into this thing. You see what I mean? I still got to figure out a way to make ends meet through a sharecropping, through a this, a that, a third, right? So we were imagining black labor power in the context of what it could get us within the broader system. We were imagining labor power, right? Black labor power in the context of how can it make it to where we'll just be left alone? We weren't imagining black labor power in relation to the outskirts, in relation to the lumpen, in relation to the people who are embodying a type of liberatory force and had already liberated themselves through refusing the system in its whole self. And I think that's a major lesson we can take from this time period is looking, okay, where is that level of refusal happening and where are the pockets where we can make it happen, right? And then connecting that to these centers of black labor power and saying, where do these connect and how can we center that refusal while what would be the word? Capitalizing on that black labor power so we can further fuel the refusal and integrate our labor power into those areas. And I think that's, you feel me? And then protecting it as was just said, you feel me? But yeah, that's all I had.
Jay, did you want to go? Well, but I mean, we're over here talking about patriarchy. So I just want to make sure I ain't speaking over my sister. So,
All good. You can go ahead.
all right. So, again, very valid points that were made. I want to kind of take these questions into a different realm. Not that no one was like not wanting to talk about it. It's just I want to make sure that people can get an understanding of the importance of not just black labor, forced black labor, but also our black labor, what we've utilized to help us move forward. And why it's been important to the imperial mode for us to be manipulated into thinking that we need to give time, effort, energy, all of this to a system that gives us basically nothing at this rate. I want to start with the fact that the first person to die for America was an Afro-Indigenous man. People don't know that. That's Crispus Attucks. He died for America's interests as an enslaved person. They have consistently used us in the form of that labor as disposable assets. So we've been important to propelling the agenda that is we know is imperial, but not a lot of people know is colonial, and still permeates today. I want to talk about, Emancipation Proclamation, because we got a lot of people, that will tell you, that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves and that he loved, black people and he loved indigenous people and, all of this. And he was just, this, pine cutting, axe swinging individual, but he wasn't. He was a fucking racist. He was a part of the imperial process. He was a part of the imperial mode. People don't know that this is how he originally talked. And I'm just going to quote what he said. This is disgusting. I will say then, this is his words, not mine. I don't want nobody to get it twisted with me. Please. I will say then that I am not, nor have I ever been in favor of bringing about any way or in any of the way of social and political equality for the whites and the black races. I am not, nor have I been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with whites. And I will say, in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the whites and the black races, and from living together on terms of social and political equality. It says and in such much. I don't know why they said that. I think that might be a typo. They cannot so live while they do remain together. They must be in position of superior and inferior. And as much as any other man, and am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. This man was sending letters to people in South America during a time period where they were classifying it as Pan-Americanism, which was they're trying to get the Brits out of South America, out of North America. And they used they used black individuals to invoke that white agenda. People don't know that again, sending letters talking about how they want to put us on the not the good side of Madagascar, the bad side of Madagascar is what he was saying. He was advocating for people to go to other areas. I mean, like even the fallacy that people believe in, because they watched that Denzel Washington movie, The Great Debaters, where they talk about Willie Lynch. Willie Lynch was an ideological fallacy. He was someone that was created that told the slaves, when you act this way, we're going to send you to the West Indies. We're going to send you to where it's worse. See, people don't realize that 5% of our ancestors staked not staked claim, but were forcibly brought here to North America. 46% were sent off to South America. 45% were sent off to the Caribbeans and the West Indies. We do not properly align ourselves with understanding the importance of black labor within the confines of the imperial mode. They used us, they abused us, and we have people that say that this system was meant for us. Never, never. Not when you got people talking like this. No. So what made us vulnerable to it were individuals that told large swarms of people that we needed to collectively come together and put our liberation in the form of the Emancipation Proclamation. That was nothing more from the transfer of the slave owner to the slave state. That's all that ever was, and that's all that it ever will be, which is why what we were fighting for in the 60s was civil rights and not fucking equal rights. This is the system that we live under. We are put in a position where we fight for concessions, and then we get 20 years down the line, and you hear a person like me or Emon or CJ or Jay talk about it, and you guys are like, wow, I can't believe you guys are talking like this. I can't believe I never thought. Well, we learned this from other people. We learned this from contextually and traditionally putting in a historical manner, in a respectful manner, our oppression, what we went through, how other people went through it, so that we could get to this point where we can tell you that there are time periods where we were used to the point where our labor benefited the imperial mode, so much so that we're in the position now where you have the 19-year-old that would rather work for a scat pack rather than work to own his means of production, not knowing that he just stowed and picked and packed portions of a scat pack. He didn't picked and packed $100,000 worth of stuff, and he's now in a position where he's only gotten paid $200. We have to understand too, if we use Kwame Nkrumah's framework, the neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, when he talks about, we have to use the framework in regards to foreign aid, in regards to what we see now with organizations. Look at them as foreign aid the same way that I do. If they're not putting themselves in a position to tell you to liberate yourselves in a means that's respectful and traditional to your oppression, meaning to the struggle that people had to go and endure through, the same as you, they're not an organization for you. And one thing that I've always kept clear, but has been made very prevalent, is a video that Emon put out, which is that there's going to come a time and a place where Black liberation separates itself from non-indigenous liberation, meaning from the people who are non-indigenous. You guys, our liberation goes this way. At some point, we're gonna have to come to that consensus, and I don't even think we're at that rate yet. So I hope I answered the question properly, but there are aspects of this where we have been vulnerable. vulnerable to that oppression, but we've also been vulnerable to a time period where we've been codified into thinking that there is no other option. There is no other time period that they can give us the example to say otherwise. And so I'll land my plane there.
Yeah, my brothers have spoken a lot of truth, and I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of those sentiments because I feel like it has just been an ultimate limitation to be, at the mercy of what the system offers, at the mercy of what structures we are surviving within. And that is something that I think we can take and learn from our ancestors, during that period of time, during Reconstruction. I think something that was really powerful was the fact that we were creating our own educational systems. And I think that has guided us in what we can do moving forward. But at the same time, we are also needing to attune to the specific needs and experiences of our people in this particular moment. And that is something that, again, is going to be best done outside of the system as opposed to trying to work within the confines of it. And something else that someone mentioned was the fact that like there are implications and ripple effects of this violence that we all have to contend with and that we are left to account for. No one else is accounting for that. So we as Black people we were tasked with reconstructing what Black families and communities could be post enslavement. Like there were a lot of Black women, people were happy that um, we weren't having to be coerced by an enslaver, but at the same time, people weren't ready to just go be subservient to their husbands, and it's interesting to actually tab deep into what people's needs are because I think that's ultimately going to determine our vulnerabilities and our power.
Thank you all. I also want to add to this, during this time period, the strength and vulnerability that the Black church created and offered over the years post, even during enslavement time. Obviously, the Christian Bible was used as a very purposeful tool to justify the state of enslavement. I don't think that's ever stopped. But later down the road, especially into more contemporary times, we're seeing Black preachers especially work with Democrat politicians to get the Black constituent vote for that politician who was reformist, or more so oftentimes lip service. This happens so often, especially across the South, where little breadcrumbs are given to Black communities. If you vote for XYZ white dude who wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire, but he really wants this seat. And this is a thing we see today. I was berated a few years ago, 2020, by a civil rights leader, nonprofit activist. I don't know this man, but he's also a preacher, very well known in my state, and was screaming at me about nothing you do matters unless you tell people to vote. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that, sir. But it's such a, this is a long-standing thing. At the same time, though, it was Black church women who got together and organized the Montgomery bus boycott. And that was one of the most powerful boycotts we've seen. They were also women, this is a little known history, who said once the boycott was completely disrupted in Montgomery, okay, we should own it. Do you understand what could happen if Black people in Montgomery, Alabama at that time owned the bus system? And oh my God, if they'd made it a co-op, I get chills. This would have changed the United States, would have changed the South. And who was it that told them no, that's too much? It'll evoke too much anger, which like might have been a thing, but I also just feel like we got to go somewhere. We have to go somewhere. And what we see with the status of Black people's economic condition in Montgomery today is a result of not taking that fucking leap of faith. And I don't want to use the word faith. I think it's a strategic leap that says we're not playing by this system anymore. And that's, women put that forward. And those were church women, but they weren't leaders in the church either. So I think there's a really important thing Black people have to reckon with like our leadership, extremely patriarchal, oftentimes caught up in very patriarchal religions. And I'm looking at the Abrahamic ones primarily. And I think this has continued to be a problem and a hindrance in a lot of ways. Isaac, I see your hand. And then I do want to move on and remind people, please take stretch breaks and go pee and stuff. You're human. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to mildly piggyback off of what you just said in regards to the Montgomery bus boycotts, because a lot of people don't know about this history. Is that yeah, people probably seen that Joe Budden podcast where they talked about, how Rosa Parks' husband had a car and how that probably all, but no, the real history of it is that they used Rosa Parks, the NAACP, and they have a long-standing history of integrating themselves into a process of trying to align with the system, which is and it's a fallacy compared to what really needs to happen. And they inevitably went with Rosa Parks instead of someone who through a patriarchal lens was too dark, was at the time I believe was pregnant, she was too young. But this is integral, and I want to highlight what CJ said, because CJ has been highlighting the anti-blackness that is integral in all of these questions. We have to understand that even our own people will utilize anti-blackness and utilize those frameworks to try and tell you that this is what revolution looks like. This is what us fighting back looks like. And in all actuality, they could have just went, with the original individual. They invoked a patriarchal, very anti-black agenda, talented 10th, Rosa Parks into this process. And I use the term talented 10 because that's something that even Du Bois, went back on, how anti-black that was, how colorist that was. And so I just wanted to point that out. I know we're trying to stay on track, but that you made a valid point. So.
Yeah, thank you. I can talk about that for days. And even the treatment of Fannie Lou Hamer at the Democratic National Convention by Black leadership, male Black leadership, Christian Black leadership, for another day. Okay, so let's move on. I think this is another slide being shared. Black workers embedded in community. We're going to talk about the Dodge Revolution Union movement. Thank you. Let me get this chat box out of the way. Okay, so let me give you all a little background. Hold on to questions, please. So the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement recognized traditional unions were fighting for wages, but often ignored racial exploitation. Does that sound familiar? There's no race problem. We just need to focus on the class war. But the League of Revolutionary Black Workers saw that Black workers sat at a strategic industrial checkpoints. They linked factory strikes, anti-police struggle, and community political education all with each other. Jay, I want to shout out you uplifting education. And so we want to talk in the chat a little bit about today, where do Black workers cluster in your region? Are you aware of this? And if Black labor withdrew today, what would stop? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a little ahead. There was another panel question. Can we take that out? My bad. Disregard. Pretend you never saw that. Okay, I wanted to give you that context of the Dodge Revolution Union movement. Ignore the questions for the panel. And we can start with Carlos for this one. What did the Dodge Revolution Union movement and the League understand about power that movements today often forget?
Thank you. I think that they understood the connectivity. I think they were able to take, we have like work, police and community. You know, a lot of people think those are separate issues, but they were able to take them and put them together. So this way they're hitting one system from all the angles. And that's what made it really powerful too. And, you know, so they moved in a fashion that, you know, was unstoppable. And they didn't just strike at work, they tied it into what was happening in the streets and in the community. And today we separate everything with different struggles. You got housing, you got labor over here, you got police surveillance over here, you know, you got child care issues, health care over here. And really, uh, and this is the good thing about what people like Huey P. Newton put forth with what's this term he used? Uh, Intercommunal, you know, where there's no such thing as, you know, separate communities or separate issues. We are all small communities interconnected, you know, through struggle at that. Because as long as we can remember, I think Isaac mentioned it, and a bunch of us have mentioned it. This thing has been going on forever. You know, this isn't new. So yeah, that's that. I'm sorry. I was ranting a little bit, but thank you.
So, to go into the intercommunal power mapping is also another thing. Not only did they realize that, hey, it's, as we say, many struggles, one fight, they also realized, well, once we know who to strategically go after, then we can actually do something. We can't just randomly decide to go after people on base level knowledge. We need to know when we do this, we're going after a one hit, because they knew that in that after power swing, once you go after it, if you don't get them, it's just going to go back to their way. It's going to go back to the people in power if you do not ensure that when you go after them, it's done. Because we've seen it time and time again. Algeria, India, they did their revolutions, and when they didn't go through all the way and ensure that they changed the entire system, what? They have a caste system. They still are stuck under the oppression despite the little movement they have. I mean, even in the United States and our progressive era, we got the meat packing industry to change, civil rights. We got some of the rights, and what are they doing now? They're clipping at it. They're trying to ensure women don't get to vote anymore because they got married. They're trying to find ways that women don't get to have bank accounts anymore. They're doing things to um, make that after power shift not matter. So with Drum and the League, they try to ensure that that power still stood with them, but other people, got in the way. So that's a whole historical lesson.
Ashay, I'm gonna add to that because I do feel that there are a lot of things that the league got right. And one of those was not being committed to obeying those union contracts and the union constitution. I think that that's something that I've been seeing and observing recent labor movements is with the port workers strike like a couple years ago. They struck and it made a lot of impact, but they were still loading those ships to send weapons to Israel to harm Palestinians. So what are we staying loyal to in these moments when when we're unionizing, when we're striking, when we're creating actions for not just ourselves, not just our personal gain, but for to move forward collective and to move in alignment in everyone's liberation, not just ours. And that's something that I feel like the league was doing right. They weren't concerned with the union bureaucracy, and they were also focusing deeply on connecting uh, revolutionary theory directly with the struggles of the Black workers. And there's a lot of education that has to that has to happen in any setting, out in labor, outside of labor. But at the same time, no matter who we're talking to, we have to make it so that we're talking directly to people's needs and experiences. We can't just, hit people over the head with books and say, hey, why don't you get it? Or just infantilize people or criticize people for not understanding how to apply this. If you're not saying it in a way that is applicable to their lives, then that's, we're not going to get anywhere. So I do think that it's important to recognize that strength that the league had in being able to mobilize in such a profound way these Black workers.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that was said. Just to shout out Drum and the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. Definitely representing for Detroit and whatnot. Yeah, everything. Carlos hit it on the nail right away, talking about the connectivity. Everybody else definitely, cooked it up. Put that cherry on top. It's about that connection between the labor and community. Is missing. We just had to be honest with it. It's gonna become to a point that the union, as they are now, the unions as they are now, and I've been with the UAW. I've worked at Chrysler. I've had other positions, held other positions to where the unions there is no real connection between them. You don't know your union rep. You're paying dues for a middleman. And they're not even teaching the employees, any revolutionary theory, any, practices on, defending themselves, against management, against these corporations. There isn't, any awareness from them or any, solidarity when it comes to amplifying, demonstrations about policing or anti-blackness. Not even addressing the primary contradiction of the settler colonialism here, and as we see with Drum, it was a total difference. And I think it's important to be clear on that when looking at what we are presented with now, and just thinking ahead, like how can we build that that worker power to where we are struggling to own the means of production, um, yeah, to where we are moving to where we are looking to make establish more worker cooperatives and things of that nature. That's power. Not begging for better wages on a planet that already is already in turmoil over the overproduction as well. Don't we can't even get on our production when it comes to the eco side, that is the the effects that it's having on the planet, the only home that we have as well, a total disconnection there. So yeah, all of these struggles are interconnected, and for us to continue moving as they are separate, hurts us in the long run, and it keeps us, marching in circles and whatnot. And I'll pass it off.
I just want to add one more thing because it reminds me, I forgot which revolution, we haven't had many here in America, but over the world they have been, very active in that. But um where it didn't work because they didn't have this global revolution, and that's what intercommunalism is, and that's what we dealing with right now. I always think of it in this theory, I'm just imagining sometimes, to where what would be the global effect of an American revolution? What do you think would happen in all of these nations like Congo and uh, Venezuela, even Iran? I think overnight the world would, the world's economy would change overnight, not the whole entire world. We would probably have a lot more, work to do after that. But um us Americans, and this is just, I don't know if I'm going off a little bit. I think about, like, especially with strikes, with like Amazon or, these big box warehouse places where the people who are selling their labor are extremely pacified with health benefits or, scat packs and things like that. And what if we kind of organized around that? Like, okay, you guys want to keep going to work. We're gonna put 1,000 people on the easement of your parking lot so you can get no trucks into Amazon for as long as we see fit. Again, I do think um, the question to me is, okay, us, this group, this panel, and a lot of people understand this concept of a global struggle. But Fred Hampton, brother Fred, in the 70s was fighting over this very same thing. And fascism cannot be defeated with reform, okay? It won't be beat that way. And it has to be, liberation is going to have to be taken. And I kind of get confused sometimes because I don't know where people think we gonna go after this. What's the final destination after Donald Trump is done with his 4 years? Stop it. He's a puppet, and imperialism will continue if we don't hop in and do something about it.
Yeah, no, I want to piggyback off of what was said, but before I do, I want to answer the question. You know, what are movements today like forgetting? That Drum applied. It's that imperialism is not our friend. Capitalism is not our friend. Resource imperialism is not our friend. They never have been. See, what a lot of these organizations and a lot of what these movements today tell you is, and just recently, tomorrow we're going to have probably in the tune of hundreds of thousands of people across the nation that are from the African diaspora that are going to go to these No Kings protests. They're going to go to these protests thinking that they're in advocacy of their liberation, but we have multiple accounts. Me as an investigative journalist, as a decolonial journalist, I get reports from these demonstrations, every single time, of somebody from our community that looks like us that is being messed with by some organizer from that said movement. See, they also lose sight that we are not fucking disposable assets. I'm not an asset to you. I'm not something that you could just ball up like a fucking piece of paper right now, and just throw away. That I'm not that. But these movements, they utilize their access to us as such that they could just throw us away when they feel like we're not acting in a manner for which that perpetuates their fucked up ass goal, that eliminates us from the whole entire process. That pisses me off. Like I said, that, and it goes back to the question that we asked earlier. And for the forms the extraction being a foundation, it is foundationally embedded in these movements to tell people right now, like myself, okay, whose utilities are about to get cut, rent needs to be paid, certain aspects like that, for me to use my last dollar to put in my gas tank, knowing damn well that gas is going to be almost $8 a gallon now, and that's just for the winter grade. Watch when the summer grade comes around.
Is Isaac? Oh,
Oh, sorry, my bad. Am I yelling?
no, you're bad. No, you're bad.
No, okay, my bad. I didn't know I was gone. We're in a position where we are telling people to do things and they don't have the resources to do it. So we're telling Black and brown and indigenous bodies to go to these demonstrations and they need food. Are you meeting them where they're at? I had a private conversation, and I'll just chop it up to, we were talking about a video game. in the tune of tens of thousands, how is it that we're not walking into these stores and we're not walking into these grocery markets and we're not getting what we need? Why are we not doing it? Because the movement is causing mass scarcity. They're telling you that you can only demonstrate what you go through from 1 to 4 because we didn't went and got a permit and the permit says that we could do it. And now we have, since from applying that permit, we gave the feds the opportunity to work around our liberation. That's what we continue to do. So they have completely forgot the mindset that is being an anti-imperialist. You know, I keep saying it. We need to start getting back into the position where the beating up our managers for acting in a manner that appeases imperialism should be put on the back on the table. We should start inflicting bodily harm to those that inflict bodily harm to us, that tell people to go out there and go and demonstrate some form of said solidarity with the oppressed people by telling them join our strike. What did we not learn from SAG? Did we not learn from UPS? These are people who told us to go out there with pickets and pitchforks and fight for them to have $40 an hour. Okay. And then they created a process for which that part-time workers only got 15 hours a week, 15 to 25 hours a week on $21 an hour. And people who have been working for UPS got for more than 5 years got $40 an hour. And then they created what? Rent hikes. They legitimize rent going up. They legitimize costs going up. So it's a never-ending story. We're just stuck on the fucking dragon. Okay. We're acting like we could get the horse out of the mud, you know? And I'm referencing a movie. I apologize for those that don't know what I'm talking about, you know? But we keep getting put into these positions where we keep getting told by the movements that say that they align with our sovereignty, that this is what we need to do. That this is how we need to act. And so to answer that question, they've forgotten that imperialism is our enemy. That resource extraction is our enemy. We look foolish right now advocating in some degree for $35 an hour minimum wage when we know right now our brothers and sisters in the Congo are barely even getting a fraction of a penny for the cobalt and coltan and uranium and lithium that is being extracted, that's killing portions of rivers that are historically footed in not just our history, post pre-colonial colonialism, but a part of an apparatus and an ecosystem that we'll never get back, going back to extraction. So we're at a stage where these movements will tell us to do the complete opposite to what we're supposed to do. And we're at a stage now where are we going to continue to keep, again, going back to the scallywag, the notable scallywag? You know, we're going to keep allowing the scallywag to come around and giving us, a new set of guidelines and a new set of lists. Are we going to apply in a manner for which that is equitable to not just individually, but collectively, to our liberation? I think what the last thing that I said is what we should be striving for. We should be applying that all of these components of oppression are consolidated to one thing that you could, put a pen in, is that it's settler colonial values based off of imperialism. So I've talked too much. I apologize.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, now it's time for that slide. So, can you pull up that image? Thank you. All right, now we're gonna get in the chat again with this. Panelists, you're welcome to as well. So we're bringing it to now. We've talked a lot about historic contexts. Where do Black workers cluster in your region? And the second question, if Black labor withdrew today, what would stop? On that first one, you're thinking about where do you see or know of where Black peoples are mostly? Is this logistic hubs, transit systems, hospitals, food distribution, public schools, or municipal services, things like that. So drop the industry arena that Black workers occupy primarily where you are. And then the second question is more open-ended, of course. If Black labor withdrew today, what would stop based off of that answer? Thanks for putting that in the chat. I see retail food distribution and factory. In my area, I know it's pharmaceutical distribution and food services as well. Nursing, hospital and food industry. Majority of the economy and services. Yeah, so if Black people pulled out of this and took their labor back, what would happen? What would stop? All essential needs. I know my grocery store would be empty. Is this a trick question? Black people are integral part of so many essential systems. Was it a trick question? Mine almost hit that 11%. Food service and retail, everything would stop. Yeah, a lot will be halted. Working, maybe less in numbers, working at an airport, a great number of Black ramp workers, towing planes, fueling, etc. If half the ramp workers refuse to be exploited, a lot of these private jets would be hard pressed to fly. Mm. Mm. So right, we're figuring it out right now. If so much depends on us, why does so little belong to us? I believe, is this also another slide? What is a revolutionary general strike? If that is, we can move on to that. If not, just let me know. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so column to our left, a revolutionary general strike is, and this was for the person who asked, what do we do now, especially, but everybody. Cross-sector, coordinated, sustained, politically aligned. It withdraws labor, takes that away. What we were just talking about, if Black people took their labor away in your region, what would stop in your region? How disruptive would that be to this death cult, predatory, murderous, genocidal colonial system? It withdraws purchasing power. It withdraws compliance. Love that point. Huge. And it is backed by food distribution, medical support, strike funds, political education, communication networks, community defense. This is it's a blueprint right here. This is really great information. It's such a simple breakdown. And Daii mentioned this earlier. A lot of people don't want to talk the conversation of reform versus liberation because it gets scary because people panic like, well, what do we do? But it really is as simple as make sure people can eat, make sure you can tend to wounds, heal the sick, give people medical, and I would also add mental health support, strike funds. There's resources for people to be able to afford what they need as the consequences show up, because people will be punished for going on strike. We've seen this time and again. Political education continues. Things like this discussion, the work people on this panel are doing is a part of this already. The YouTube channels, the TikTok pages, etc. Communication networks. We're here talking, make a buddy. And then community defense, one of my favorite things to talk about. These are aspects that help sustain, protect, and get us to, I'm gonna say it again, thrival. Making these things work is not rocket science. It's not impossible, and it's actually made up of elements that require effort and consistency, but they aren't overly complicated either. We can see that right here. And a lot of y'all, I'm positive, a lot of y'all in the chat, this is why you're here, are doing something or some things on this list. I see your hand raised, Carlos.
I think this, I'm trying to get this full graphic here because it's great. And it reminds me of something because I thought about a general strike here in Wisconsin for Starbucks. There's 340 locations, I think. Don't quote me. It might have been 240. Okay. The Democratic caucus here in Wisconsin got four out of hundreds of Starbucks locations to strike, which was ineffective. It felt really good. You know, the symbolism was there. You know, it felt really good. But when we talk about strike funds, I did some calculations for a week to replace the missed wages. It would cost $10 million in strike funds. Okay. So we have, and goes back to reform being a part of this imperialist, you know, system, because we have billionaires like uh, George Soros and Mackenzie Scott, bless their souls, I guess, but they'll fund, you know, a movement that can be surveilled and watched and uh, coordinated, but they won't touch a strike fund, and that's really strange to me. That's what I gotta say.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was just talking to someone today. I've been working on a zine project. What could 10 co-ops do with $81 million? Because I was appalled at how much money was raised for Kamala Harris overnight when she had no platform. Remember that? $81 million. And just thinking if 10 co-ops received even 8 million, that across the United States, that would change Black-owned co-ops, that would change so many regions, like transformative as hell. And to think that there's $80 million people have, and obviously like it's not sitting around in one big vault, but to have that collective um illustration shows that we can do that in the right way. Also, we can apply that shit to stuff that actually gets us free instead of a fucking war criminal. Consider that. I'm not apologizing for cursing. Yeah, it was extracted from the people. Absolutely. I think it's super cult-like behavior. You know, it's like passing the plate so I can buy my Bentley. I'm your preacher. And now you're going to heaven. All right. Last question for our panelists, and I'll start with CJ for this one. From your perspective, what separates a reactionary general strike from a revolutionary general strike?
I'll say a reactionary general strike would enlist people not even knowing what they're general striking for. So we're talking about general strike funds, and I think this is pertinent to the conversation because what do the people need to go on strike in the first place? They need safety nets, they need systems of support, of mutual aid, especially when it pertains to disabled people as well. When you're doing this general strike, are you creating mass blocks or in your area to get people the proper mask? Are you setting up things and where people can get properly vaccinated against COVID? Things like that that many people may not even be thinking about. When you're during a general strike, do you have lawyers? Because the state may force you into a position of where you may have to be forced to go back to work. You know what I'm saying? Do you have protections? And if you want to do a direct action, do people know how to do things like de-arrest? Do people know how to do things such as move through crowd search? These are all things that you need to be thinking about when you're talking about the general strike, mass mobilization of protest to get a direct aim. And like I said, what are we general striking for? Are we just all calling off work? You know what I'm saying? Are we general striking to, again, so the general strike for reform would be um we want a general strike for better wages or better working conditions, or we want a general strike for more days off or more paid sick leave, in which they can, this is the hypocrisy of the state and just the capitalist hierarchy. Whatever they can give you, they can take away. So once they give you the concession of better pay, they can hike up the prices. So due to inflation, it's not the same anymore. Uh, and I think we need to just be general striking for abolition. And what does this general strike look like as founded in abolition, as in thwarting the systems of capitalism, imperialism, and what I'm saying, global enterprise? And how does this general strike look on an international scale too? Because we understand that the capitalist mode of production is the mode of production that is adopted by every single nation state in the world. You know what I'm saying? There is no beacon of socialism. There is no island of socialism. All I see is red cops. Let it be China. Let it be even in Russia. You can't read Lenin, even though I'm not a Leninist by any sort. We see that the police state is ever increasing everywhere. The state of the surveillance state is global. You know what I'm saying? The world capitalist enterprises, no matter how much fighting that they may do at the UN, they can come on the concession to keep this imperial gain in which all nation states seek to benefit from. We see this in how almost every nation state wants to maintain a consistent monopoly in places like Congo. We see this with China. They want to maintain this systemic monopoly because the only way that you become a superpower is by going to the place on where the heart of extraction is, which, as we can see throughout history, is the African continent. I say this in one of my essays. I believe it's No One Wants to Fight for Israel, in which I say that the mechanisms for the systems to imperialize and colonize Palestine first had to exist within Africa. It first had to exist within the shackling of the continent. And I think we need to understand that when we see when we see the external imperial apparatuses, we must understand that for the United States to even be an external power and even for it in order to exercise its power externally on a global scale, the United States firstly had to be imperialist back home. You know what I'm saying? To Black and indigenous people. And what does this imperialism look like? It manifests in the fourth world. You know what I'm saying? In places like food deserts, in socioeconomic segregated communities that were created purposely due to redlining. These are all expressions of domestic imperialism, meaning that the state is not only externally imperialist, the state is also domestically imperialist because it has to reaffirm its stature within our society and has to reaffirm its borders. And how does the state seek to and aim to do this? And how does the state to do this? It has a monopoly not only on capital and how capital is distributed, it also has a monopoly on the use of legitimate violence. And I think that's it.
Hell yeah. Definitely. CJ, just feeding off what you said. Just being clear on what we are striking for. That definitely separates the reactionary from the revolutionary actions. Reactionary definitely just seeks, to withdraw labor without challenging the social order or seeking to gain that transfer of power, from the capitalist, the ruling class, to the people. And the revolutionary general strike is seeking that shift in social order, that transfer of power. We seek, to take power, to share power, and to build power and defend that power as well. We talked about, our lived experiences. We've talked about, the historical context. The Montgomery boycott was brought up as well. And, again, we talked about how, we were deterred away from pushing further, striking at the root, really getting down to building that power and whatnot. And this is the time. The conditions are definitely set and laid out for us. We do have the frameworks, the blueprints. All we're doing, everyone here is just the evolution of that revolution. And the objective is clear, to continue to build outside of the system and practice, our right to self-determination, our right to define what freedom, what liberation means to us. And the revolutionary general strike is key because it brings people to that understanding, especially with the general strike US seeking that 3.5%. Everybody's not going to be on board, and that's cool. Again, people need to see it to believe it, but us actually just doing the work, building up the infrastructure, showing the people that they do have power to defend, to own, and to practice self-determination within their communities. we're not just out here reactionary strike. They tend to just do it for one day, or they again have no clear vision to what is taking place afterwards. But with the revolutionary general strike, we're practicing what will be the new world. We're putting that into practice already. We're building the relationships through that participation, definitely looking different for everyone. But we have to start somewhere. We all have an obligation. We talked about all the causes, what extraction, oppression, what it looks like, the different forms and whatnot. It's only logical for us to be striking, to abolish this system, this reproducing system, and also demonstrate that solidarity to others. Us doing what we have to do here in the U.S. colonial states, and also alleviating pressure that the U.S. is taking on and imposing on others. Our comrades in Congo and Palestine, and so on and so forth. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, hold on. Okay, there we go. Yeah, the distinction I think between a reactionary and revolutionary general strike kind of like it's based in where it's starting from and where it's coming from. You see what I mean? I saw somebody in the chat had mentioned like a lot of people get caught up on the oh, we need to wait until we're at the 3.5% to do it. I think that's like I I mean, I get the thought process, but I think a lot of times what's happening is people are so divorced from the struggle itself and being on the ground that they think that the general strike isn't something that's built. You see what I mean? They think there aren't these small, again, I keep coming back to this, but these small acts of refusal and these small pockets that we expand further that enable that 3.5% to even emerge. They understand the 3.5% as the starting point instead of a type of tipping point that we should be taking the push further to make the general strike a work is hit. You know what I mean? Capitalism hit like that. They're not understanding it in that way. And I think the way we combat that is kind of understanding again this distinction between a reactionary and a revolutionary movement, a reactionary and a revolutionary general strike. Reactionary movements, reactionary moments are things that are commanded from on high. There are these things where it's like, okay, somebody says we need to do this, and now the masses follow, right? There's this weird division. The revolutionary movements come from the grassroots. The revolutionary moments come from the emergent struggles of the people on the ground, of the dispossessed. You feel me? There's a reason why so many of the most powerful struggles, like like people just couldn't predict them in the way that we imagine, especially not the people who are holding these so-called positions of power. You know what I mean? So I think a major thing that we need to emphasize in terms of developing that revolutionary general strike, and obviously this is happening with GSUS, but something we need to, you feel me, keep in mind as we're struggling is emphasizing that point of like, look, we're not telling you you got to make this particular decision at this moment, but guess what? People be tripping like there isn't a block to go organize in downtown. Like there isn't doors to go knock and talk to people down the street from them. They be acting as though there are not prisons right, like probably an hour drive away from them with juveniles in prison. You got political prisoners in there. You've got people who are going through politicization in there. And folks don't want to engage with them, right? So I think that's kind of the jumping point we need to get people to, okay, we need to get people talking to each other. We need to get people talking to the people they kind of treat like they don't matter. Because the free labor power is sitting. And that's where, you feel me, that 3.5%, a lot of that's going to come from those masses. You feel me? And that's where the tipping point comes. And all these other people who got all the different stuff can come along with the struggle when they get along. But yeah, that's all I got.
I think I just want to say that everything that I'm seeing today in our not in our organizing, in our demonstrations are reactionary. especially my time with organizations. I'm just gonna keep it funky with y'all. The DSA, PSL, they are led by professional managers. So you have this extremely reactionary element to it. It looks revolutionary though, and it smells revolutionary. You walk into their meeting spaces and they have Fred Hampton on the wall, man, and they'll be in these. They'll have a protest. Well, they'll bring a member of the professional managerial class up to quote a Fred Hampton line and have you call in response that you're a revolutionary. It's insane. What I do want to say is that this thing on waiting for this 3.5% is a professional managerial class quote. That is a quote of reform, a tool of the buffer class, so you won't go and off with their necks for that what they got. And they say, hold on, just wait a minute. We almost there though. So if we just keep building, give it time, and then we've been giving it time since Brother Fred Hampton, who said out his mouth, everybody in the state of Illinois better get ready for a revolution because we gonna have one. So if Brother Fred Hampton, who analyzed class for a living as a young man, if he said that the conditions were ready back then, what has changed now? You know what I'm saying? So we have to. Uh, I know people have their opinions about Che Guevara, and I do too. But he said that the revolution is not an apple you can pick when it's ripe. You have to make it fall. All right, and what we're doing right now is making that apple fall. I will say something to what Brother Emon said about organizing in prisons, organizing 10 doors down. And I've had every revolutionary thought. I've tried to explain to people. The Luigi Mangionis, that's reactionary. We got nothing done from that. Okay, they passed a couple United Healthcare claims, but nothing really happened. But what's tricky about this mutation of capitalism, because what this panel is about historical worker movements, especially in the Black community. But what we have to remain aware of is that capitalism has mutated. Every time Washington prints more money and bails out the people in Wall Street, our paycheck shrinks. That's how inflation is really caused. They keep printing out money and bailing out the billionaires. Meanwhile, us organizers, the people in this very chat room right now, we don't have the resources to do the organizing that we really wish to do. And I think if we first off, we should focus on gathering those resources. And like Brother CJ said, you got to trick these people at this point. You got to trick them into a general strike. Like we say, if they don't want to strike at Walmart or, we here on your sidewalk for the entire day, you're going to get your points taken or whatever. You might get fired, but it's necessary because we understand that we're willing to sacrifice everything, and why wait till tomorrow what you can do today?
Yeah, well said, everybody. I just want to first highlight, that the Revolutionary General Strike, is not a symbolic walkout. It's a coordinated withdrawal from the imperial apparatus. It is us completely eliminating ourselves from the oppression, from the exploitation, from the energy withdrawal, from the time consumption, from telling us that we can't have time with our families, that we can't do things that we know we're able to do, but the only thing that keeps us from it is that we got to make George Soros more money, we got to make Bezos more money, we got to make Apple more money. All of these aspects of oppression, I also want to, because we did bring up and we did mention Palestine, and we've been mentioning our brothers and sisters in Africa, and we have to understand that this needs to be international. And there are certain aspects of people that are boycotting and have done their own general strikes already on the African motherland. There's individuals that have done it in North Africa and West Asia, that are right now that are combating the imperial mode by saying, you know what, we're going to completely, cut off all important exports and trades in one specific, not just in one specific region, but in two specific regions in the Suez Canal, the Strait of Hormuz. These are strategic elements that we need to we need to fortify. We need people to be out there on boats, in what my people called the Western Gate, but now they call it the Golden Gate Bridge because they went and they put a bridge there. But it's my indigenous ancestors' waypoint for their spiritual way forward to go and meet with the rest of our ancestors. This is historically present. This is historically sound. Why is there no people out there on boats that are making sure that none of these people, none of these big import ships and tankers and whatnot are doing, aren't even making it inside our deltas? Well, it's because we've reformed this thought process into thinking that, what, if we, and someone made it very clear in a comment on me promoting this discussion today, is that this does not need to be just one day, a general strike. It has to be for until we get everything back, until we get the education back, until we get the resources back, until people abroad get that back. That is where we're at right now. So a general strike to me, a revolutionary general strike to me, includes on an international level people who are involved in Cuba that are being told right now that y'all have to live. And this was even before, and I want to make this very clear, that they were going through blackouts. There is an anti-blackness that is very prevalent in Cuba. I am one person who can tell, who is not just a testament to that, but I have friends that have been there, that have seen that, that have witnessed that and endured that had to go elsewhere because of that. And this goes back to what Kwame Ture said in regards to anti-blackness that sat in areas where, and CJ, I'm just going to tell you this right now, I hope you wrote that down if that was not a bar that you already had written down, in regards to Red Police. That was such a bar, because there are certain elements of disguise that we go through when we start to glorify certain aspects of someone else's society and try and implement that into ours. And I also want to say, Carlos, bring those people to me that have any disregard for Che Guevara's work, because Che Guevara is someone that we need to be implementing right now into our framework and understanding how, again, imperialists are not our friend. So in regarding a general strike, we not only have to include elements and institutions that already exist. People like Omali Ishatella, Chairman Omali Ishatella of the All African People's Socialist Party, have created these institutions. They need help. They need the resources. Going back to, how does $80 million get funneled into a campaign for a genocider prosecutor? Well, because people have been manipulated through that reactionary mindset that's something that will venerate some form of equality under this guise of democracy that we have. And we don't. As Duruba bin Wahad classified this is a duopoly, a democratic fascism. What do we do with fascism? We kick its ass is what we do. We don't coddle to it. We don't say, hey, let's come to some concession, meet me at the dinner table type shit. No, that's not what this is. This is not the environment for which that we can allow that to even fester. We're in a position right now where, if we do not orchestrate a revolutionary general strike on an international level, we are not only doing a disservice to those that have already called for this, like Duruba bin Wahad, that called for a united general strike against fascism, a united strike, a united front against fascism, but we do a disservice to ourselves. How do we make sure that people who are feel comfortable with the revolutionary general strike, we point them in the directions for which the organizations need the resources and can get those people those resources? We have people in Operation Jackson, people again, All African People Socialist Party. The General Strike is here. Tin Media, J Art. We all have done our part in making sure that people have resources that are needed. I'm a geopolitical analyst as well. A big part of my job is making sure that people in Palestine have water. So I sit on panels and on TikTok every single night. Jay is an accountant. I send her an invite every single day. You know, I'm sitting on panel making sure that people have water, that people have food, that people are getting to these links. This is what we need. We need to create not just a comfortability buffer system, but we need to create a system for which the people can feel comfortable with saying, you know what? Fuck having to force myself to work 90 hours just to get $300 a week, just to get $400 a week. I'm going to go and I'm going to join the general strike. I'm going to go and I'm going to join Tin Media. I'm going to go and I'm going to join any organization that's out there. And any organization that's telling you to go to these demonstrations, that's telling you to advocate for PSL, for DSA, for all of these organizations that take money from individuals that sit in Tunisia right now that own a football fucking field. I'm a journalist, but I'm an investigative journalist. So I could get down to the nitty gritty of who's getting paid and who isn't. Okay. And I can tell you right now that the people who are doing the work aren't getting paid. The people who are the people who aren't doing the work are getting paid. The people who are doing the work aren't getting paid. That's how this has happened. That's how this goes. So a revolutionary general strike needs to turn that on its face. We need to stop acting ass backwards and thinking ass backwards, as Kwame Ture would put it, because this is what this system is. It's ass backwards. And we need to start thinking forward thinking that people on panel right now have even generated their time and effort, energy, people like myself, and I need help. I didn't know if I was going to make it today. That's a thing that the system put me through. So a revolutionary general strike has to be implemented solely on the basis of making sure that we do not codify ourselves into believing that a month is what warrants us to go back to the system. A month and maybe they'll understand. No, I want to answer a question in the comments and then I'll pipe down. I promise. Someone asked, someone said that we should be making billionaires illegal. No, we should be making the thought process of financially crippling a system of people. We should make that illegal. We should make the exploitation of man illegal, of women illegal, of trans women illegal, of trans men illegal. All of that needs to be implemented. The LGBT community plays a pivotal role in our liberation. They always have. People forget that. They intrinsically forget that, and they'll tell you to invoke some anti-LGBT, some LGBT, anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and agenda that sits diametrically opposed to our liberation. So we need a revolutionary general strike. We don't need a reactionary general strike, because reactionary suicide is exactly what it is. Reactionary suicide. It implements a thought process where we think that we're winning, like Charlie Sheen, and really we're not. Okay, we're declining. We're on a mode of oppression. And so, thank y'all. I apologize.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Okay, I lied about last question, but I am gonna pass it off. Daii, let me know if this is correct because it says you're taking this now. To Daii to head us towards closing.
Absolutely, fire. Definitely a great group of comrades to have this discussion with, and like we said, this is definitely first of many conversations to be held. But yeah, it's here. The framework is here. The solution is here. It's definitely time for us to implement everything that we've talked about and to continue doing the work. Um, when we talk about General Strike US and we talk about the Black community and a revolutionary General Strike at that, I wouldn't be here if we weren't pursuing that, or if I didn't have the opportunity to help shape this collective tool. And I tell anyone who seeks to ensure that this collective tool is utilized and wielded in a revolutionary manner to get involved, to tap in, and to help shape it. The volunteers are needed. A lot of people they like to spectate. A lot of people are caught up, with life, but we cannot let that defeat us and deter us from taking the necessary steps. As Isaac said, it's revolutionary, it's reactionary suicide. And that's what it is. This is about survival, and our survival is primary. It's about giving back to the next generations to, be able to continue to advance the struggle. After this, definitely there will be more contradictions to arise, but we at least want to give them, a foundation to stand on, to where they do, own their resources, to where they, do have control over their time and control, over their bodies and whatnot. So I do encourage, everyone to, like Isaac and the other comrades and panelists have said, to get involved. We understand the difference between what's reactionary out there, and we understand that our resistance must be material. If you are looking to take immediate actions, we must be looking to take those actions and meeting the people's immediate needs, and it's just as simple as that. We are not waiting, for any handouts. We are building power. We are building the conditions to where 3.5% millions of people can withdraw, so we are not dependent on systems and, big corporations and things of that nature. So if you are interested, attend the next General Strike US teaching, the onboarding, April 5th. That's at 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and those are, every other Sunday. Check out the GeneralStrikeUS.com website. You can even check out our LINKTREE as well. I'm pretty sure they're dropping it in the chat. We need folks who are ready to step in to start, building on the ground. This comes, arises in the form of starting or joining a local General Strike US chapter, and doing the work. It's either now or never. And if we are not acting, then we are allowing others to shape what our liberation should be, and we are allowing other groups to, tell us what a general strike is, and only seek to gain those small concessions, only seek to get concessions for a small group of people, and not the rest of us. And we've seen through the historical context that we've just discussed that if we are not at the table shaping, our demands, and building, those as well, practicing that self-determination, that we will be excluded and left out of those spaces, and be given this or possibly worse. As we see, imperialism is definitely the highest form of capitalism, and that imperial boomerang coming back, and we see, fascism, the cop cities, and all of these things in motion, and the technology aspect of it as well. Things are changing. We got robot dogs, drones, things of that nature. So yeah, it's all about survival at this point. And thank you all for being here. And I'll pass it off to anyone else.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I want to just offer that you all do walk away with something to think about, to do where you are. So, two questions for you. What is one capacity we need to build, and what role can I realistically play?
I think I think that the language is kind of confusing me. I don't know if I'm tired right now, but one capacity, I'm thinking about, like, we need to build more co-ops. We need to build more situations where people own the what they produce.
Yeah, no, I want to. I'll answer both. It says, what is one capacity we need to build? We need to build self-sustaining systems that don't sit within the consumerist framework. We have so many people right now that need food. We have so many people right now that they need resources that I'm pretty sure individuals could help aid in a process to get them that, free of charge. But we're having Black bodies being told, to go to demonstrations, and they're not being met with the proper needs that they're living without. Like I said, this Saturday, people in the tune of hundreds of thousands are going to be in California at these No Kings protests. And how many of those people need food? How many of those people need, a sustainable living? And are we creating a system that sits outside of the capitalist mode that helps them, get that somehow? Are we creating, systems that make it harder for them to get that? So I do think that is one thing that we can build is self-sustaining systems, and there are some that are out there that I've spoken about, others have spoken about as well. One that is just represented today as well. This is what role can I realistically play? I'm already connected to a multitude of organizations. I could say, me personally, maybe getting in tune with more, but I'm more on a level of what I can do personally is what I have been doing times a thousand, which is bolstering the minds and the voices of the oppressed, making sure that people understand that the elements of imperialism will always exist, especially if we do not combat it. And I think that, for the average individual, it's just going to an organization, starting there, getting to know your neighbors, even somehow knowing the neighborhood that you live in, the apartment complex that you live in. This system deeply it like on a sponsorship level, creates a system where it tells people to be individualistic and to be, mischievous. Don't talk to your neighbor, because you're nosy. It's like, no, like, if some pops off, I'm pretty sure we're all gonna be outside. Like, this is, the last 15 minutes of Friday, watching, Day get fucking, his ass whooped. Like, come on now. Like, we only apply that community aspect when we see, a calamity, or we see quagmire, or we see, you get me? Like, that's when we want to come together, and we have to move away from that. We have to put ourselves in a position where we can say, what does my neighbor need and have, or what does my neighbor need and have that I don't have and that they might need? The barter system. I created a pamphlet 2 years ago, which is, what are some things in your fridge and within, that you could eliminate completely from buying, and you can start combating on a level of like, for like greenhousing and utilizing, and combating HOAs and utilizing the sidewalks for community, gardens. Certain flats of lands and parcels could be implemented into community gardens that then can feed the community. So now we don't have to worry about, on a level of scarcity, that people don't have food, they don't have resources to get that. I'm gonna just say it right now. There's a bunch of non-black people, non-indigenous people that are here that are watching. There has been people's LINKTREEs, people's PayPals, people's Venmos, Cash Apps. Y'all can start hitting those and stuff, and start helping people out that are giving you the resources, or the information, and start giving us the resources that gives you that information. Because my work goes a long fucking way when I have the resources to back it. I don't have the resources to back it, so you're not seeing this beautiful face, every Monday, every Wednesday, every Friday. You're not seeing this because I don't have the resources to do it. I got to work elsewhere to be able to provide that. So you want, a person like me, Carlos, Emon, CJ, Educator, Dallas, Cat, all these people to continue the work that they do. You have to help us. You have to institute some form of fucking caring, I would have to say, because there's a lot of people that they like to utilize the work that I do, the work that others do, and they like to ride the coattails of that. Educational wise, they like to become stylists. That's taking my words, my intellectual property, and saying, you know what, I'm gonna say what you say because I don't want to take the time to learn it myself. I don't want to take the time to educate myself. This goes back to what Kwame Ture said. There's nothing that I know that you can't know. There's nothing that I can't read that you can't read. And if you need help with it, ask. Ask. That's all that it is. But people need resources, people need help. And that's one major component in making sure that not just we're self-sustaining, but we sit outside of any status, quo, or narrative that is reformist. So that's just where I'll leave it.
Real quick, it was just a question in the chat that I feel like we can just touch over real quick. Kat asks, how do we keep from marginalized Black and brown people from basically doing all the work, and also the movement, the general strike, not becoming co-opted, and our demands watered down and things of that nature. And that's definitely a struggle, and that's definitely one of the reasons why this conversation was put together, because it is a struggle. I do know within the general strike, we've been getting all different types of people, on different levels of understanding of this system and whatnot, and different understandings of, reform and liberation and things of that nature. But it's through political education. We struggle. It's through getting them involved in the community work. I forgot who on the panel basically said we have to trick them in so many words, but getting involved in mutual aid, feeding the people, getting them to utilize their skills, their talents, to empower their community, and basically getting them to see that it's better to own the means of production. It's better to be able to go to this community free market versus biting your nails and stressing over you going over budget at Walmart or Target and things of this nature. So it's a struggle. And also I would say, how do we get it from becoming co-opted even more is the connections, building those relationships. That's one tactic I've been using. I've everyone here on this panel, I've definitely been watching. I see them on my For You page, and definitely been watching them speak, and I know their attitude towards a lot of these concepts, these themes, and that's why they are here. We are here to speak truth to power, but finding your tribe, building those connections, even in a greater, broader aspect with the General Strike US, being strategic with our outreach, seeking groups who are already meeting the people's needs. That's a big part, and also working with groups and seeking to align ourselves, building coalition with groups already advocating for items on our demands list, already advocating for reparations, already advocating, for land back. A lot of the demands that we get pushed back on, a lot of our demands are not, again, rooted in policy. They are about liberation. They are about us, practicing our right to self-determination and building the conditions to where people can withdraw their time, energy, and resources and skills, and transfer them into community. And that's what it's all about, that transference of power. We already have the power, we just have to stop giving it away. But just to answer your question, that's basically it. Political education, building those relationships, it's definitely a struggle, but it's necessary work that needs to be done. Again, groups like Cooperation, Jackson, Community Movement Builders, all of the groups who are taking actions to meet the people's material needs, and building that community power, showing the people that, us going out every other month trying to appeal to the hearts, of people, or just, waving the signs or things of that nature, that's not going to get us too far. But I'll leave it at that.
Thank you all so much. So this is the closing word. Big thank you to the panelists. And as Isaac said, hit those Venmos, hit those Cash Apps, follow and support the work of everyone here. Big appreciation. Thank you all for your thoughts tonight. We organize for liberation and not reform or inclusion into the U.S. colonial state. We have a moral responsibility to organize for true liberation. If we proclaim all power to the people, we must understand that with great power comes great responsibility. History shows that when Black labor moves, systems shift, and history also shows that backlash is real. A revolutionary general strike is not a slogan or a date we set. It is a disciplined, coordinated withdrawal backed by infrastructure. But liberation isn't just disruption. It requires us to define our own interests and values. Liberation requires us to define our own interests and values, to decolonize our minds and practice, and to articulate what freedom truly means for our communities. We have a right to practice self-determination, to build structures that serve us, not a system designed to extract from us. If our interest is liberation, then our responsibility is organization grounded, intentional, and accountable to our people. And that's where I'm going to leave us for the evening. Thank you all. Be safe and stay dry. It's raining where I am. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.